When Denzel Washington walked into that hearing, he didn't need fanfare. He came armed with facts, locked in like a man on a mission. Across from him, J.D. Vance sat smug, gripping a pre-written script like a shield. What was supposed to be a policy debate morphed into a high-stakes ambush. Cheap shots, veiled insults, the kind of televised disrespect that makes millions feel it in their gut. But Denzel didn't blink. Instead, he hit back with a $250 million lawsuit that blew the courthouse doors wide open, turning the trial into a battlefield for dignity and truth. Headlines detonated. Alliances cracked like glass, and the world watched as a sitting vice president began to squirm under the weight of justice. Would J.D. Vance finally taste accountability? Or would Denzel Washington be buried under the very system he dared to challenge? That morning, Capitol Hill wasn't just the heart of governance, it was ground zero for a quiet war no one wanted to name. Room 226 of the Dirksen Senate office building had become a pressure cooker. The polished mahogany gleamed under cold fluorescent light. The flag loomed silently behind them, a mute witness to the storm. The official agenda: federal health care, budget reassessment. But everyone in that room knew better. This wasn't about numbers, it was about survival. Who gets to live comfortably and who just gets to live, period. J.D. Vance sat dead center, his dark gray three-piece suit pressed, sharp enough to cut glass, fingers toying with his nameplate, eyes sweeping the chamber like a lion sizing up prey. A subtle nod to his aide, a barely there tap to cue the cameras. He wasn't just chairing this hearing, he was orchestrating a performance of power. "Let's begin," he said, smooth, cold, every syllable dripping with the arrogance of unchecked privilege. You could hear the thread underneath. "You're in my house now." Then came Denzel. No theatrics, no waves, no handshakes. He walked in like a storm cutting through calm skies, controlled but impossible to ignore. Polished shoes clicking against marble in a rhythm that owned the space. In his hand, a red folder stamped Emergency Community Health Impact. The gallery overflowed. Journalists packed shoulder to shoulder, cameras locked on him like snipers. 70 million people tuned in live, holding their breath. Would the only black man in that room be silenced or burn the place down? Denzel sat, unsnapped the folder, laid out reports, maps, hard data, truth, sharpened and ready. His first words, clinical, precise. But his eyes never left J.D. Vance. "We're not here to juggle theory," he said, voice calm as steel. "We're here to expose the harm you're willing to cause." The room froze. Truth had arrived and it didn't knock. It kicked the door off its hinges. With one tap on the screen, the lights dimmed. The screen behind him flickered a live, not with gimmicks or glossy slides but raw data. CDC bar graphs, blood red columns screaming across the chart like alarms. On a radar, brutal math, unsoftened, unforgiving. According to current projections, Denzel said, steady, unblinking. These cuts will put over 9.3 million Americans at risk. Veterans, miners, truckers, the people who built this country now being written out of its future. His words hit like bricks through glass. The next slide, faces, not stock photos, not staged propaganda. Real people. An elderly man in his 70s, oxygen tubes snaking around his hollow cheeks in a rust-stained trailer. A Marine veteran in Texas, shirtless in the brutal heat, injecting insulin beside a busted fridge. A Kentucky steelworker, skin stretched tight, over bone, cancer mapped in black and white x-rays. "This isn't theory," Denzel said. "These are people I've looked in the eye." He didn't beg for sympathy. He demanded respect. The room, loud moments ago, fell into suffocating silence. Even the stenographer's fingers froze. Then came the shift. Vance straightened in his chair, smug grin sliding into place like a weapon. He leaned toward the mic, voice slow, theatrical. Each word sharpened for the evening news. "Mr. Washington," he said, calm and cold, "this isn't Hollywood, this is Congress." The insult hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. A dog whistle dressed as decorum. A single phrase meant to erase Denzel's credibility in one breath. You don't belong here. Your facts are props. You're just an actor playing a part. Then the next blow, delivered like a punchline. Let's leave the drama to the networks who thrive on it. The aides smirked. Phones lit up. Tweets were drafted before the echo faded. JD wasn't debating. Policy he was staging humiliation. But the cameras caught something Vance didn't. Denzel's face, still unblinking, calculation flickering behind his eyes. A silent message. You wanted a performance? You just stepped into your own. And when Vance tried to twist the knife, you know? Some folks in this chamber want to believe you're Malcolm X, he drawled. Pause. You're not Malcolm X. You're the discount bin version for people who never opened the book. The chamber collapsed into silence. Not outrage, something heavier. A collective realization that a line wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. Denzel didn't rise in rage. He didn't speak. He gathered his papers slowly, deliberately, like a man handling evidence for the trial that was coming. His folder, worn at the edges, still defiant in its red ink. And as he stood, the cameras caught it. That rare kind of stillness that fills a room with warning, not surrender, reckoning. When Denzel Washington walked into that hearing, he didn't need fanfare. He came armed with facts, locked in like a man on a mission. Across from him, J.D. Vance sat smug, script in hand, ready to pounce. What should have been a policy debate morphed into a high-stakes ambush, chip shots, veiled insults. The kind of televised disrespect that hits millions in the gut. But Denzel didn't blink. He hit back later with a $250 million lawsuit, ripping courthouse doors wide open, turning the trial into a battlefield for dignity and truth. Headlines exploded. Alliances cracked like glass. And the world watched a sitting vice president squirm under the weight of accountability. Capitol Hill, that morning, wasn't just the heart of governance. It was ground zero for a war nobody wanted to admit was happening. Room 226 of the Dirksen Senate office building felt like a pressure cooker. The polished mahogany desk gleamed beneath cold artificial lights. The flag loomed behind them, a mute witness to the storm brewing inside. The official agenda: federal healthcare budget reassessment. But everyone knew better. This wasn't about numbers, it was about survival. Who gets to live comfortably and who gets to live, period. J.D. Vance sat center stage. His dark grey three-piece suit pressed sharp enough to cut glass. Fingers tapped his nameplate. His gaze swept the room like a lion scanning prey. A subtle nod to his aide. A barely there tap to cue the cameras. He wasn't just chairing a hearing, he was orchestrating a performance of power. Let's begin, he said, smooth, cold, arrogance humming beneath every syllable. Then Denzel walked in. Not like a guest, like a storm rolling through calm skies, controlled, but impossible to ignore. His polished shoes clipped against marble in a rhythm that owned the space. In his grip, a red folder stamped Emergency Community Health Impact. No smiles, no handshakes. This wasn't politics. This was justice. The gallery overflowed. Journalists jammed shoulder to shoulder. Camera lenses locked in like sniper scopes. Over 70 million people tuned in live, waiting to see if the only black man in that room would be silenced or burn the place down. Denzel sat, opened his folder, and laid out reports, maps, raw data sharpened into weapons. His first words were clinical, precise, but his eyes never left Vance. We're not here to juggle theory, he said, voice calm as steel. We're here to lay bare the harm you're willing to cause. Truth didn't knock that day. It kicked the door off its hinges. Without theatrics, Denzel slid out a single worn page, edges frayed from use. A tap on the embedded screen, and the room dimmed. The projection above his shoulder flickered alive, not gimmicks, not glossy graphics, just the brutal math of devastation. A CDC bar graph, blood-red columns climbing like alarms. No sugarcoating, no smoothing, just raw truth. According to current projections, Denzel said, voice steady, these cuts will put over 9.3 million Americans at risk. Veterans, miners, truckers, The people who built this nation now being written out of its future. Then came the faces. Not stock photos, not staged propaganda. Real people. An elderly man in a rust-stained trailer, oxygen tubes snaking across hollow cheeks. A Marine veteran in brutal Texas heat, injecting insulin beside a busted fridge. A Kentucky steelworker with stage 4 lung cancer mapped in merciless detail. The light from the projector crawled over marble walls, painting scars. These aren't abstractions, Denzel said, low and resolute. These are people I've looked in the eye. Stories I carry. Silence swallowed the room whole. Even the stenographer froze mid-keystroke dot across the table. J.D. Vance sat still. Too still. A flicker of something discomfort, maybe behind the smug facade. Then came the smile. Not warm, not friendly. A sharp corner lip curl, teeth glinting like a blade. He unfolded his arms slow, deliberate, and fired the first shot. Mr. Washington, Vance said, voice dripping contempt. This isn't Hollywood. This is Congress. The dog whistle screamed. Under the surface, the insult wasn't about policy. It was about erasing credibility in one clean stroke. Let's leave the drama to networks that thrive on it, he added, grin widening into something uglier. Honestly, I've seen interns deliver clearer points without needing a slideshow or a spotlight. Every time you raise your voice, this chamber loses IQ points. If I wanted a TED Talk, I'd stream one preferably from someone who actually read the budget. Laughter rippled quiet, poisonous from his aides. Smirks scribbled into the record, but Denzel didn't flinch, didn't blink. His silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation then. Vance leaned in for the kill. You know, he drawled, slow as venom, sliding off a fang. Some folks in this chamber, they want to believe you're Malcolm X. The air collapsed. Every atom in the room seemed to freeze. You're not Malcolm X, Vance spat. You're the discount bin version for people who never opened the book. The insult wasn't random. It was surgical, an erasure masquerading as a punchline. He didn't just attack Denzel. He desecrated a lineage resistance, dignity. Survival paid for in blood dismissed as branding for the ignorant dot. The room didn't gasp. It imploded in silence. And Denzel, he didn't rise, he didn't rage. He stood in a stillness so heavy, it made marble groan. Slowly, deliberately, he gathered his papers, every chart, every audit handled like evidence he refused to let vanish. Then he tapped the screen. One last slide, a GAO report stamped in blue, government seal shining like a verdict. It confirms, Denzel said, voice cold as a judge's gavel, that 78% of these proposed cuts fall directly on families of color. Number theatrics, no pause, just truth, weaponized. And for a heartbeat, the smirk on Vance's face cracked.